Charity Hospital was the landmark of the whole city. And people knew they were safe when they went there. They knew we would take care of them.
The hospital was legendary. Everybody knows who Charity is.
There was a long legacy of care for people regardless of their ability to pay.
It's like a spiritual feeling when you're in that building. It's something walking the halls of that hospital.
But if the storm hit, I have no doubts that miracles were happening inside that hospital.
Within 2 weeks after Katrina, we had over 200 military personnel cleaning and making Charity Hospital operational again.
It was ready to receive patients. And I know for a fact that we needed that hospital.
Something's being hid inside this hospital. No doubt about it.
I was leaving out of this hallway right here. I'm walking down the steps. A guy across the street came out with a mask on his face and told me to stop and don't move. I saw he had an AK-47 in his hand, and as he was approaching me, he was shooting.
There it is. We have a GSW to the right, mid-back, go flat, please, on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Shot me. And I wound up here in Charity. You're doing good, mommy. You saved my life.
People call it big charity. I also think that it's like mother charity.
It was the heartbeat for the city of New Orleans.
Didn't matter if somebody had insurance or didn't have insurance. We're there to treat people and save lives.
Charity Hospital was the lifeblood of the city of New Orleans.
Charity Hospital gave birth to most of the citizens of New Orleans and gave life to many dying people here. She stood by our side. She was here when we came into the world, and she was here when a lot of us left. If there's something to be called your mother, it was Charity Hospital. That's our mama.
Charity Hospital was the oldest continuing operating hospital in the United States.
So it was made on the bequeath, the merchant who died and said, I want to leave this money to care for those people who don't have the means to care for themselves otherwise. And so that's a long legacy of that hospital to provide for indigents.
It was in 1927 that the big hospital we all lovingly call Big Charity was started. It was one of the largest, if not the largest hospital in the world.
The new Charity Hospital, an imposing structure built with state and federal funds obtained during Huey Long's regime, is operated by the state and contains free clinics for all races, regardless of color or creed.
It was the Daughters of Charity that provided the nursing care and for a long time ran the hospital.
We started the School of Nursing, and that became a very prominent school.
They did the nursing care, they kept the books, and they even cleaned the floors. So everybody became very close to the Daughters of Charity because they rolled up their sleeves with their habits on, and they did whatever was necessary to keep the hospital going.
When I left Charity, I was 80 years old. That was 14 years ago. I'm now 94.
They were strict, but they were kind and gentle, and they ran a good ship. They did.
When you walked into Charity Hospital, you knew why you were there. And there were the spirits of the healers that had come before you, and that you better turn out as humble and as kind and as loving as the ones who walked before you.
You are taught to treat people the way you want to be treated, and that's the spirit. It's about love. It's about love. That's the culture of the hospital.
And they had a sign that was placed up by the lobby where the unusual occur and miracles happen. And miracles happen all the time. I saw them happen.
Daughters of Charity, which ran the system for over 200 years, turned it over to the state of Louisiana, and in the late 90s, Louisiana State University took over control. So within the LSU system, the chancellor has overall management of Charity Hospital.
Charity was really a mecca for education. It was a great place to see a lot of diseases and learn a lot from a lot of different patients. Over the course of the years, because of the relative decrease in funding, the bed size has contracted, and so it's not been exactly the same experience today.
And one of the things the LSU system realized, the doctors were dedicated, the nurses were dedicated, but let's not fool ourselves. The patients who are in there tend to a ward, one bathroom shared by ward, no real places to have a conversation in private. I mean, all kinds of things were wrong. I mean, and I'm just talking about just from a patient-centered point of view. Did that necessarily affect the outcomes? No. Did it keep people from learning? No. But is it ideal? No.
The facility may have been old, but the care that was offered there was the best. We would see about 200,000 ER visits a year. Outpatient visits were nearly 500,000. It was one of the busiest ERs in the country. It was the safety net hospital for the state of Louisiana.
Nobody asks you, can you pay? Do you have money? That's not the first questions that come out of your mouth, as it is, you can't get through an emergency department visit without being asked, show me your insurance card, how do you plan on paying for this visit? And that's something that we have never ascribed to.
The vast majority of the uninsured ended up in the Charity Hospital system. Because it was public and Louisiana being a poor state, it was a system that was very resource restrained. So we often couldn't pay as well as our competitors in the marketplace, couldn't staff at the numbers, certainly didn't have the physical plant that other institutions in the community had.
The problem with Charity Hospital as a building is that the state failed to put money back into it to maintain it, because their focus was to move towards a new facility, a new hospital, and have a new mission, which would be a hospital that catered to both public and private. So for years, LSU and the state have been planning to develop a new hospital. And in July of 2005, they presented those plans to the state legislature, but there was no money. And then a month later, Katrina hit.
This storm had a different feeling. It wasn't like the storms we dealt with before.
It was in the middle of the Gulf, maybe a few hundred miles off Louisiana, and it was a Cat 5 at that time.
Prior to landfall, there was an eerie quietness that came over the entire city. There were no birds chirping, there was no traffic on the highways, and it was just quiet.
We had triaged out as many patients as we could, but there were a few hundred patients remaining in the hospital that couldn't be moved out, and we prepared to defend in place.
This massive concrete building, you could actually feel it vibrating in the wind.
After the storm, at around 3 in the afternoon, we actually walked around. We went out and surveyed the hospital and then headed back at about 6 p.m.
2, 3 in the morning, something like that, the night shift woke us up. We had got news that the levees had broke and that New Orleans was flooding.
Somebody woke me up and I jumped up, and the first thing I grabbed was the damn camera, you know? And I'm running down the stairs and you can see there's over 5 feet of water in the basement area and it's still rising. Then there was a sinkhole that broke through right outside the emergency ramp, sucking water in even faster.
And within that basement is a conduit for power, as well as our own plumbing.
We brought everything to the second floor auditorium, and that's where we set up our emergency room.
Nurses cared for patients on their knees.
It was Monday night when the second generator went out and we were plunged into darkness.
One of our nurses came in and shook me awake early Tuesday morning, said, "Dr. Berggren, look out the window."
Then it was a lake around Charity. You couldn't get in or out.
Now all of a sudden we had a hospital full of critically ill patients with no water, no electricity, no laboratory, no x-ray, no anything.
I think all of our impression is if a natural disaster were to occur, that we would give it about 48 hours and then the federal government would clearly come in and we would be stabilized, rescued. That's not true. 72 hours turned into 96 hours and there was still no definitive hope.
I remember seeing someone from Governor Blanco's office come out and say hospitals had been evacuated, you know, getting people to safety. But almost simultaneously, I was getting these emails on my BlackBerry from doctors and other healthcare people in the hospital saying we're still here, we haven't been evacuated. And the worst part of all is that they think we're gone. So I literally convinced a helicopter pilot to fly me in. And there were people who were pleading for their lives by hanging a sheet outside the window and hoping someone sees it in the bright sunlight.
We took big sheets. We were all signing our names, said, "We're still here," you know, or "The spirit of charity lives on."
So this is what a charity hospital looks like in the middle of a natural disaster. We're in downtown New Orleans. This is actually an auditorium that we're standing in now. At one time,
I'd never seen anything quite like that. They were trying to cycle people on and off the breathing machines and have people ambu bag when they weren't on the machine.
We had a ventilator patient. He's laying there, I'm bagging him, and they called us over to do something else for another patient, and he looked up at me and he went, and he grabbed the bag, and he started bagging himself.
Man, some of these folks were cramping up, you know, pumping them for so long, providing ventilation for people that should have died. You know, and I'm not talking one day, and I'm not talking a few hours. We're talking 5 days after the hurricane had already hit, and life was still being sustained.
Saw a Tulane hospital across the street. They evacuated, but it was their hospital that did all the evacuating. We were waiting for the state. And we were saying, wow, what about us?
A National Guard truck was pushing a wave down the street, and he pulled over, and some of the guys, when they asked him, "Can you help us?"
We were trying to transport some of the very acute patients to Tulane Hospital. They had a helipad set up, and we were trying to get our sickest patients out.
Dozens of Black Hawk helicopters flying around town, and
watched as medical personnel at Tulane were picked up by helicopters, while Charity's patients, some on ventilators being worked by hand pumps, waited in this parking garage.
I'm not sure what was happening, but the fact of the matter is in medicine we have a pretty clear triage. Sickest patients go first. It makes perfect sense and it works. And that's not what was happening here.
What's going to happen to some of these patients if you don't get them out of here?
2 of them have already died here on this ramp waiting to get out.
Two died
in this very spot.
2 died here because you couldn't get them out.
2 died here because we could not get them out.
There was gun play in the neighborhood, and so it was deemed unsafe to transport more patients to the Tulane rooftop, and so that was shut down.
So many of my coworkers didn't know if their family survived. They had no idea where anybody was.
We could not order x-rays or CAT scans or electrolyte levels, and so we had to really rely on physical diagnosis.
I didn't realize how we had coated all of our patients in this veneer of technology, which had sort of isolated us from them. When all of that was peeled away, it was miraculous how intimate the environment became, how meaningful touch became, how meaningful a calm voice became.
In that old-fashioned medicine, less tests, fewer medications, more, sitting down talking to people. A lot of it was hugs, words of reassurance. Maybe it was medicine the way medicine was intended to be.
These nurses, these doctors, these clerks, it seemed like they had the gift of life in their hands. When they touch somebody, it's just reassuring that I'm going to live. I'm not going to die here today.
We had made up our minds that we came in here together and we're going to leave together. It was that spirit that came up. I might die with a uniform with Charity Hospital insignia on me, but nobody abandoned the patients. It became like a spiritual bond.
Dear Heavenly Father, we ask that you strengthen us. We ask that you touch our hearts. Let us know that you are the one to rescue us. My child, I have not forgotten you. With the voice in our body, Father God, with the breath that we have left, if it's our last, we will say thank you. And we continue, each one of us in our own way, and as one, standing together, all on one accord. We know no other words to say, but thank you. Amen. And amen, amen, and amen.
We had a nurse here named T who taught us a song, and the words of the song are, I need you, you need me. We're all a part of God's body. It is His will
that every need be supplied. I need you, you need me. We're all a part of God's body. I love you, I need you to survive. You are important to me. I need you to survive.
It was on the Wednesday after when I spoke with my mother first thing. I'd call her first thing in the morning. Her first words were that your children are okay and your house is okay. So it was quite a good day for me. And I was just elated. It was amazing. And at that point is when my mother said, your dad is on his way there and he's going to get you out. And I said, oh, no, don't let him come. It's not safe in the city. She said, no, he's coming to get you.
I was there by my office, which is in the front of the hospital. I saw 2 flatboats coming up. This man yelled, I came to get my daughter.
Someone came and said, there's some guy in a boat on the front steps looking for you. And I thought, oh my gosh, he did, he made it here.
She was surprised to see you.
I was very surprised. It was very emotional. I still get very emotional, as you can see. He said, get in the boat, we're going home. And I said, no, I can't leave. I whispered it to him because I felt so bad that he had made that effort to come all the way down there to get me, and I couldn't leave. There was too much, the patients were there, the staff was there. It was a responsibility that I took, and I wasn't going to leave that.
Then I realized it was the thing to do. She couldn't leave. But I realized too I had to get them out of there. By the time I got halfway to Baton Rouge, my cell phone would work. So I called my friend, the state senator. Standing on the side of the state senator was a second in command of the enforcement branch of the Louisiana Wildlife and Fisheries Commission.
These airboats came down the street and got us out of there.
And man, I tell you what, I have to commend the Wildlife and Fisheries. Those men worked their tails off all day long to get every patient out of Charity Hospital.
Just to see doctors carrying patients from the 12th floor, the strength mentally and the determination, we're going to take care of you. It was like watching a wall moving and now we begin to win. We were losing, now we're winning, and everybody just cheering them on. Hey, go get them.
This is one of our patients. He's in the staging area, and I looked at him, I said, we're going, and he just raised his arms, and I took his picture.
There was a banner that I wrote. The banner reads, CHNO, Charity Hospital, New Orleans. 1, Katrina 0. We are winning the battle. Last thing I remember is sitting on the boat, looking behind me as the sun's setting, knowing that at this point, all the patients are gone, and that, this place may never be reopened. This might be the last hurrah for Charity Hospital.
The military went into Charity Hospital and they began cleaning it up.
Out of every structure that we've been able to assess, came up with Charity Hospital as being the best opportunity to regain medical infrastructure in New Orleans.
We had the decontamination team. We had the initial cleanup team. Then the 82nd Airborne came, 2 whole companies. We had the Navy there. We had myself and my contingent of National Guardsmen.
Members of the active component Army, the USS Iwo Jima Fire Control Team. We had a professional engineer, electrical engineer on site.
We called and wanted to know what can we do to help, what needed to be done. And they said that we could go downtown and help with the cleanup of the hospital and all that it needed to get, cleaned up to get patients.
We met at a meeting point at a McDonald's on Jefferson Highway. The military escorted us in, and then we went to the hospital to help them clean up.
There were doctors that I met who were part of the cleanup efforts. So these were residents in the ER and surgery who came back and helped clean up the hospital. You had people in there who really thought, we're getting our Charity Hospital back.
They wanted the first, second, and third floor done so they could be there for people who come in and start, get to work. Had nothing to do with pay, had to do with the people, because people needed Charity Hospital.
The only caveat was that the basement should be pumped dry and there needed to be an assessment of what was in the basement.
I could hear some pumps going. So I walked down the street and lo and behold, they got some Germans pumping out the Superdome, the parking lot. I said, come with me. So I took the head of them over to Charity Hospital.
The fire brigade, the German fire brigade, dumped their hoses into the basement and began pumping. I still to this day don't know how a German fire brigade was in New Orleans. But hey, I wasn't going to turn it down.
Bam, it happened. They brought 2 pumps over. These were 4-inch pumps. And these machines, whoop, and the stuff was out of there in a day and a half. We started decontaminating Charity Hospital. And they went through and they scrubbed stuff out. Then they came back with the water trucks and rinsed everything down. And then we pumped it all out again. After the decam left, then the regular guys, the regular Joes, would come in and clean again.
It was ready to go. I mean, we had hundreds of troops in there, and we know how to do this.
So the place was powered, occupiable, according to the U.S. Navy OSHA standards and their testing. It was cleaned. There wasn't any trash to worry about. The basement was pumped completely dry. The sump pumps were operating just fine. We were ready to operate on the day that all that came together.
The hospital was cleaner then than it had ever been in the time that I worked there. The hospital looked great.
Spotless. Spotless. Beds were made, gowns were on it, waiting for patients. And we showed up in uniforms and said, let's go. We're ready to go to work.
And when we told the state we were ready to open the hospital, this was no joke. I mean, we carry with us the experts to test the air, to test for mold, and we had decon teams in there. We had people who know what they're doing. And when I reported it to the state and said, hey, the hospital's clean, if you want to open it, we can do it right now. And then I was told that there's no plan to reopen it.
The word that we got was that the governor had condemned the hospital, and we hadn't seen anybody come out. We were the only ones at the hospital. Nobody had come in and inspected it while we were standing there, and we were there the whole time. Somebody was there 24 hours a day. My God, you don't even want to come out here and talk to us and find out what we see and what we know needs to happen because we're here now? I ain't got a dog in this fight, people. I'm not from New Orleans. I'm from Los Angeles.
I was given a directive from out of the administrative headquarters office in Baton Rouge, board it up and seal it up and not allow anyone into the hospital. You know, either do this or lose your job.
Word just came down for us to leave the building immediately, to get off of the property.
The LSU system leadership had planned to move to a new facility pre-Katrina. In July 2005, 2 months before Katrina, they had pitched their proposal to the state legislature, who loved the idea and said, yeah, this is great, but we don't have $800 million to build it. And then Katrina hit in August 2005. It was the perfect storm. LSU decided we're going to keep the doors closed at Charity, and FEMA's going to buy our new hospital.
So there was an attempt to clean it up as quickly as we can and so forth. The problem was the whole facility was not in a state that would be approved by the Joint Commission.
Well, I was one of the first officials to ask to see Charity. I was told no at first. I was told it was too dangerous. And I said, well, I still want to see it. And they said, well, we've got to suit you up. You got to wear one of these white space suits and worried about contamination. I said, I'll take my chances. I got down there, I had two of my colleagues with me. They probably had 20 folks from LSU. I insisted on seeing every floor. And the building was fine. The basement had flooded, but it had been cleaned out. And it was clear to me at that point that a decision had been made not on the basis of health care, but on the basis of other considerations not to reopen the big Charity.
What other considerations do you think?
Well, I think the feeling was that in fact, one of the officials told me if we rebuild or if we open it back up, we may never get a new hospital. And that's not a legitimate consideration, in my opinion, not when you've got people that need health care and not when you're spending taxpayer dollars.
The old Charity building was not suitable for modern health care. So the planning for a different facility had been going on for several years prior to Katrina. One of the difficulties that was preventing the moving ahead and building the facility was the funding aspects.
FEMA said that for $26 million, the building could be reopened. We appealed, came back at $16 million. So the dial went south when we expected it to go way north. And then began the long, drawn-out battle with FEMA to replace food charity.
Wow. They are using this tragedy, this disaster, as an opportunity to get something, to fulfill an agenda.
We set up tents in the parking lot and worked there.
We were seeing 60 patients a day, all managed in a parking lot with backup generators and artificial water supply and portalettes.
We had nothing but tents. And then we went to the convention center.
Emergency medical doctors who used to work at Charity are now seeing patients in Hall J of the convention center. They are not equipped to see people with major injuries, severe heart attacks and strokes, or pregnancy care. There is a shortage of hospital beds in the entire area.
But the city of New Orleans had to get on with its business of conventions and said, we need you to move.
So 6 months after Katrina, with no place to go, the best we could come up with was renovating the Lord & Taylor department store. And that was our outpatient clinics and emergency room for the charity system.
You go up the escalator to lingerie and you realize that's where the dental chairs are and x-ray equipment is. That's what we called all of our interim facilities, the Spirit of Charity.
Now we're talking about 120 patient visits a day, pretty relentless. We're constantly trying to clean it out, and it's adjacent to a food court that was dirty and had not been cleaned. Because of the food and everything that was there, there were far too many rats to deal with. It was incredibly frustrating because we felt we were on a path to not necessarily open the whole hospital, but open a component of the hospital that could deliver health care better than a tent.
It would have served a purpose as a bridge, having a central nucleus for care. We don't have to admit them, for just basic emergency care. It would have allowed them to continue with their plan, but I think it would have risked the FEMA reimbursement, and they couldn't afford that.
Charity couldn't be open as an interim facility because once you opened it as an interim facility, it was an admission that the building wasn't destroyed. Then you lost all rights to ever argue that the replacement value was what was owed.
I understand that there's business and I understand that there's politics, but there's not. It doesn't make any sense to me because it wasn't what was best for the people.
In April of 2006, remember the storm was in August of 2005, April 2006, a doctor in New Orleans could not order a test for tuberculosis. I would have had to put the patient on a bus where he would cough and send him to Baton Rouge. I've worked in many developing countries. I grew up in Haiti. I've worked in Gabon. In the most resource-limited of settings, you can do a basic microscope test to diagnose tuberculosis and not put a whole bunch of other people at risk in the meantime.
People who said, well, I don't need a colonoscopy now. I don't need cancer screening now. I don't need my mammogram now. I'll put it off once the hospital's back, right? And so their risk for cancer, their risk for heart disease, vascular disease is greater.
Will ultimately, will in some ways kill people? Yeah. It's not going to be like the dam bust and, 1,000 people die. What's going to happen is the same number, if not more people are going to die because they didn't get access, they didn't seek care, they felt uncomfortable with where they were told that they would now be going, so they just deferred it.
So about 7 months after Katrina, we had our first rally to reopen Charity Hospital. I was on the list of speakers. The LSU leadership made it clear that I was not to speak at that rally or my contract would be in jeopardy. It goes against what university principles are all about. Not just free speech, but to invoke new ideas, because that's what we try to do with our students, and that's how you build leaders. And here they were squashing that. So I resigned. There's some things in life that are important enough that you have to take a stand. The Foundation for Historical Louisiana was able to commission one of the leading architectural firms to see if Charity Hospital could be restored and reopened as a state-of-the-art hospital.
The 7th largest architectural firm in the world designed a beautiful concept plan that showed that we could get everything they wanted in perfectly, and every room was a private room. We would gut it and build a state-of-the-art hospital inside, using the buildings around Charity Hospital as the ancillary buildings. You'd save 34% in the construction costs alone. We could finish in 3 years of construction time. That would have been 3 to 4 years ahead of what the schedule is right now. When we released the study, they said we were wrong and that we can't possibly be right.
I mean, this place, all the doors, this place is locked up like Fort Knox right now. Something's being hid inside this hospital. No doubt about it.
What do you think it could be?
A building that's functional as a hospital.
Over the months, I went back in several times, and with each subsequent visit, the hospital was in more disarray. There was more man-made intentional damage.
As our services expanded, we would go back to get more and more supplies. Each and every time we went back to Charity, it looked like a new hurricane had come through the building. I can only guesstimate what happened and the reasons that it happened, and I don't think I'll go into that.
Trash throughout the place. That happened 3 or 4 days after we were out of there. Equipment being upside down, turned over, equipment not where we left it, like medical equipment being literally upended, and nothing was upended in that place.
I remember I was approached by an emergency room doctor from Charity Hospital, and he initially asked me to escort, he and his party over to the hospital. And as we were going up, I remember we saw water. We followed that stream of water into a bathroom on the 4th floor, and we found that the water had been left running. There were a couple of towels in the sink, stopping up the drain, and the water made its way all the way out into the hallway and was actually draining down the stairwell. We started hearing water falling in the elevator shaft, but then we started getting water in the elevators. These faucets were off, and then we came shortly after and they're on. We had quite a few on the 13th floor where there was no access for the public to go in because you had to have a key, and we had to use our keys to get in there to turn those waters off.
It was all an intentional effort. A decision was made somewhere higher up to scuttle Charity on behalf of a new hospital. Scuttling is a maritime term when they take a ship out and sink it intentionally. And so I think it applies well in this case. I've never begrudged the desire to have a new hospital, but in the fashion they achieve their goal, it's very immoral and unethical and probably criminal.
I think there's a risk that every one of us that has talked to you will end up bad. I mean, I found out real quick that if you don't say the right thing, do the right thing, somebody wants to go in a different direction and it's political, and they'll be done with you in a heartbeat.
Were you ever told to not talk about going back into charity?
I can't talk about that. I can't do that.
Okay.
Trying to see how I can give you an answer to that without saying that. There's nothing I'm going to be able to say that will paint them in anything other than an awful light, and that'll come back to me. So I prefer not to do that.
I know of several people who were told not to talk about Charity Hospital. I was personally standing next to one of the doctors, and point blank he was told, and I was standing less than 4 or 5 feet away from him, if he knew what was good for him, he would let it drop. And the gentleman walked away.
Some of the doctors got together and started cleaning up the hospital. And it could, you know, I don't know if I should say anymore about it.
The word was put out that if you buck their efforts, that you would no longer be needed.
The guy goes, if any more of you all get on camera or try to set up health care down here, he said, I'll make sure you never work in this state again.
You can keep arguing about it, but you're not helping the cause, because the more you keep complaining and keep saying we could have gone back in there, it confuses people. The decision has been made. We're not going back into there. That's not suitable for the future. Let's get off of that and move forward.
Ultimately, a decision was made to rehab University Hospital at that point, with the idea being that it was going to be a bridge to a new facility.
Charity was a much larger facility. But in effect, what we ended up trying to do is shove all of the patients that we used to handle between University and Charity into just University Hospital. We were on diversion almost every day of the week. Diversion means that we're not able to accept incoming people. We can't take new patients off of the street because all of the facilities in the hospital are completely filled up. So once the hospital's filled up, where do you go? There are consequences on many levels. After the storm, there was no place for the mentally ill to go.
Charity Hospital, the third floor of the hospital was equipped with a crisis intervention unit which could house as many as 50 acute care psych patients and house approximately 100 inpatient psychiatric patients.
I can tell you the third floor was fine because I saw it. I don't know what it looks like today, but I saw it. And we should have at least opened up the third floor to give some relief to these psych patients.
It's very difficult right now. I mean, it's in the newspapers as we speak right now. You know, where can we treat all of our psychiatric patients?
Hi, I'm Cecile Tebow, and I'm the administrator for the NOPD Crisis Unit.
The crisis unit's responsibilities were to respond to 911 calls involving people having a mental health crisis.
We would roll up to Big Charity, which just had a wonderful process and system for dealing with the chronically mentally ill because they saw many a day. In the dead of night, the doors are locked. Where do we go now? Like, we're able to get them off the bridge. Where do we go? We'd see the same people over and over again. Sometimes they'd just been there that morning and we were bringing them back that afternoon. That didn't happen when we had Charity. So the jail has become our largest mental health provider in the state.
We've had a number of deaths of people who should have been in the hospital and instead they were in the jail.
which is not equipped to provide adequate mental health care.
The suicide rate went up fivefold, and a lot of people just went without care. A lot. I don't know the number, but a lot, because they would end up in our emergency room, and there were people that should have been institutionalized.
As a result of the closure of that hospital and the result of the closure of those beds, I can't tell you how many lives we've lost.
I have been telling people that we have ticking time bombs out there, and it is simply a matter of time before someone or many get seriously injured.
A devastating day for the New Orleans Police Department as one of their own is murdered with her own gun.
Burnell Johnson, who killed Nicola Cotton, we had just picked him up weeks prior. And he was released from a hospital to the streets of New Orleans, and a couple days later, Nicola was dead, along with her 8-week-old unborn child. And those stories continue to still be happening.
We are at another crime scene in New Orleans. A young mother needed services. She needed help. She's reached out for help, and the help wasn't there to assist her. And I can't imagine, but it got so bad in that apartment that she had access to a firearm, and she took the life of one of her children with the firearm, and then she took the life of the other child by drowning the other child. When you close Big Charity, when you close the mental health services, when you take them and you move them someplace else, people who are living in this community, they don't have access. Those two children, we let them down, and they paid for it with their lives.
Without a doubt, I believe that the loss of Charity resulted in the loss of life for those who were not able to get treatment for their mental illness. Absolutely.
If we ever needed charity before, we sure do need it now. Yes, we sure do need it now. Oh, we sure do need it now. Hey, if we ever needed charity before, we sure do need it now. We need it to make our city whole.
Mr. Governor, Mr. Mayor, open up this facility now. What a picture you present here tonight, not only to the city, but to the world and to the nation, that we will rebuild Charity Hospital. Come on, let me hear you say, open up. Charity.
It was really a terrible time for the region. Citizens of New Orleans had virtually no health care, and the federal government was only going to reimburse the state a very modest amount of money for basically losing the use of that building. So finally, I literally had to pass an act of Congress, create an arbitration panel, and lo and behold, when we presented our evidence, I say the state, the federal government basically wrote a check for the full amount, and the state decided to build a new facility.
First assessment of Charity Hospital was $26 million. Isn't that amazing? A hospital that's damaged for only $26 million, now be $400 and something million. That is a question I would love to know the answer to.
Everybody from every corner was coming out trying to influence FEMA what the final report was going to be. Some of that's legitimate, some of it isn't. But it ultimately came down that it needed to be replaced.
When FEMA gave LSU the money, that's when I realized that if you're big enough in this state, you can break the rules and win.
1, 2, 3.
Welcome to this historic day for graduate medical education as we celebrate the start of construction of the University Medical Center.
Essentially, it's two mega hospitals, 30 acres for the VA and 30 acres for LSU site in the middle of a lower mid-city historic neighborhood.
It was all working people. It was people who had come back, they'd struggled to rebuild their homes, and I had a terrible feeling these people are going to be wiped out. They're going to be bulldozed, and they're not even going to know what hit them.
My name is Wallace Thurman. I live at 217 South Torrentine Street, New Orleans, Louisiana.
My name is Sheila Davis Joseph. I live at 2430 Cleveland Avenue.
My name is Gail Ruth, and this is 224 South Tonty.
Been living here for 28 years.
My grandfather built the house 125 years ago. It's been my home. When I went in the service, I come out of the service, I come back here. When I came home on furloughs, I came back here. This is my home, and it kills me for them to take my home away from me.
I don't believe this is going to happen to us. I don't believe this, but it is.
Why weren't we told this before why were we told come back and renovate and then tell us now we're going to put the hospital here and tear down your house?
I joined the service to fight for my country, and I was willing to die for my country. But I never thought my country would take my home away from me. That hurt me plenty.
Ultimately, the area that was selected, I know that there were people that live in that area that were inconvenienced. But on balance, I think most people will agree it's going to be a very favorable thing for the city.
Oh, I think it'll be a huge economic catalyst for the city. If you look outside the window and you see how many cranes are up in the sky right now. Across the street, we have $1.2 billion in construction going on for the new University Medical Center.
This is the largest hospital construction project right now anywhere in the globe. We had a charity hospital. What we did not have was an industry that's one of the future. You could say it's a sacrifice having gone through all of this, but in reality, we're going to be better off.
We could evolve into a world-class medical destination that would attract top talent, high-paying jobs, have spin-off businesses. What better gift could New Orleans have than the seed for that plant to grow?
The whole idea has been to transform not only the facility but the operation. And what you see around the country is these university-based academic medical centers that are destination facilities. And that's the idea behind this, is to not just build a new facility, but also build a new model of healthcare delivery for LSU, for the city of New Orleans, for the state.
It seemed that the major obligation that the charity hospital served was to take care of those who had no other place to go, were not able to get into other private hospitals. This new hospital will be a modern design, modern equipment, and I think it will function in a much more aesthetic fashion. The rooms will be all private rooms. So I think we will see a broader array of different payer mix.
They are trying to get away from total indigent care, but you're still going to have indigent people who need care, and there has to be a system for that.
This is the 6th one built. And they've always kept the name. So I thought, gee, they'd keep it, but they didn't, so.
We need to use the word charity to connect us with that 300 years of tradition. Every state has a university medical center. The tradition is lost.
Charity as a term was somewhat offensive to people, that they didn't want to be going to a charity hospital. They were paying for their care, or they had insurance that would pay for their care. And I think to some extent that was felt to be a stigma.
The closing of Big Charity was the turning point where now 9 of 10 of the public hospitals have been closed or privatized since Katrina. We no longer have a public hospital system in this state. The risk is you have a lot of people who will end up having no access. Because when someone has run out of all their other options, they need some place to go if the door is shut by all the private hospitals, which happens. And we see this trend across the country where more public hospitals are becoming privatized. And the new hospital being built will no longer be a charity hospital model. It will be run by a private entity.
The governor wanted to move away from not just LSU, but from the state running this facility and moving to a public-private partnership. The goal is to care for all patients, so not just indigent care patients, but also insured patients.
My biggest worry is it's going to lose the mission that it originally had from its inception of taking care of the public.
When I see the buildings coming up, I hope that the people in the community will get the care that they deserve, regardless of their conditions, their socioeconomic status, that it's going to be the same care that they got once before at the old charity. So that's what we're hoping for.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the formal dedication of University Medical Center, New Orleans. This medical center complex represents the bright future ahead for all of us.
We're sitting in the new University Medical Center. It is a substantial upgrade from what we're used to. It's a long time coming. Our patients definitely deserve this. Many people would say it's 7 years too late. And we could talk extensively about how many lives were lost, and we could dwell on that, but instead I would prefer to dwell on what this will become and what this will offer for an entire community. The opportunities that this hospital represents are enormous.
I hope it works. But my complaint is with the process. And you know who's paid the price? The people of New Orleans. They have been denied adequate health care because of the BS politics in this state. And it is wrong.
Charity remains shuttered. It's been closed since 2005, and it remains just a ghost of a building. It clearly came down to money and economic development over the mission of Charity Hospital. They were willing to sacrifice our community and let people die, all for their new hospital. And that's just unconscionable.
I don't know what can be done about it now. I think it's important that people know the truth. At the end of the movie, when the curtain goes down, you know who suffered? The patients. The patients.
When I walk by Charity Hospital to this day, I get a cold sweat, my gut gets into a knot, because I ache for what could have been there, and I ache for our patients. You know, part of me died in that building, and that's not recoverable.
It's here, but it's an empty house. Mother is still there, but her children aren't. To me, it's like sacred ground.
It's just too heartbreaking to think that people depended on us all these years, and we couldn't help them when they needed help the most. It hurts because it meant so much to so many people, and that's gone. I don't want people to forget.
Charity Hospital saved my life several times.
I was born at Charity Hospital, 1961.
Big Chief, young brave hunter, born at Charity Hospital, 1959. Chawa, one bar down.
I was born at Charity Hospital on June 8, 1973.
I'm Mr. Oprah. I was born at Charity Hospital.
Yo nací en el Hospital de Charity.
#1 hospital in the world. In the world.
In the world.
I'm proud to say that I was born at Charity Hospital in 1972.
I was born at Charity, and I have worked at Charity in this system for 30-plus years.
I'm Daryl Dancing Man 504, and I am a Charity Hospital baby.
I was born in Charity Hospital in 1957.
I was born at Charity Hospital in 1942.
My name is Kermit Ruffins, and I was born at Charity Hospital. I'm a Charity Hospital baby.
I was born there, and everybody in my family was born at Charity.
I was born there, had children there, and almost died there. It's going to be a part of me forever.